And so the author said, Tajweed and Tartil, recitation of the Quran. So we're going to talk about Tajweed and Tartil. Linguistically, Tajweed is the source of the verb jawwada, to make something good or to improve. From the word jayyid, jayyid means good. So tajweed is to make something jayyid. That's the linguistic meaning. According to the religious terminology, though, tajweed is giving every letter its proper pronunciation by producing it from its base and exit, its makhraj. Inshallah, we're going to come to talk about the makharij, the exits, and giving each letter its fundamental attributes. Those attributes that make the letter or give the letter its reality, such as air suppression or air expulsion. Like, for example, what's the difference between ghain, letter ghain, and letter kha? They both come from the same exit, but they have different attributes. Because when you say kha, you are expelling air. But when you say ghain, you're actually suppressing the air, not releasing the air. That's not to say that no air got out. Or what's the difference between dal, and ta? Letter dal and letter ta. They also come from the same exit. If they come from the same exit, then how come they don't sound the same? Because they have different attributes. So one of them expels the air, that's ta, ta, and one of them suppresses the air, that's dal, dal. So tajweed is producing every letter from its exit and giving each letter its fundamental attributes. What's meant by fundamental attributes here is those attributes that dictate the reality of the letter. And they make that letter different from another letter, even another letter from the same exit, such as air suppression or expulsion. Inshallah, we'll come to talk about the attributes of the letters. And tongue elevation or depression. Tongue elevation means your tongue goes up, like when you say ba, letter ba, or letter bod. Don't you see how your tongue goes up? But if you say letter fa, don't you see how your tongue is down? Or if you say letter wow, don't you see how your tongue is down? Your tongue going up or being down, elevated or depressed, that affects the letter itself and gives the letter some accompanying qualities. So part of tajweed is also giving the letters their accompanying qualities or secondary qualities that come from those essential, those fundamental attributes or essential characteristics, like the heaviness that's dictated by tongue elevation. So when your tongue goes up, when you say ba or bod, there comes from that tongue elevation another quality, a secondary quality, which is the thickness or the heaviness that you find in the letter there. Bod, Sad, Ba, Va, or the lightness that's dictated by tongue depression. So you say da, dal, fa, wow, and doing all of that easily without exaggerating and without excessive effort and without going beyond the proper boundaries. So when one recites, he doesn't strain while reciting, just recites. Like Adani said, ليس بين التجويد وتركه إلا رياضة لمن تدبره بفكه. The difference between reciting with tajweed or not is exercising one's mouth. This means that the way to recite with proper recitation is to exercise one's mouth. That means you put more effort than just regular talking, but we already said without straining. One does not pronounce it with the laxation and slack of normal talk, nor does he strain and exaggerate. The recitation is like whiteness. If it is neglected, it becomes dingy, dirty. And if it is exaggerated, it will be like leprosy. Yani becomes sickening. So when one recites, one then puts more effort exercising his mouth without straining. So how are you going to recite? The next time you pray, for example, you're going to recite your Fatiha with some effort without pushing too hard. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Ar-Rahmanir Rahim. Maliki Yawmiddin, etc. As opposed to, for example, if someone were to say something like Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim, Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen, Ar-Rahmanir Rahim. It's weaker, you can hear the difference. Like what? Like if you listen to a lot of people who want to teach Islam, you hear them recite the Quran. There's no difference between how they recite the Quran and everything else they say. There's no difference in enunciation or anything. They say, for example, this is what came in the book of Allah. Allah says, Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. For example. So better than that is tajweed. As for tartil, it is to produce one letter at a time successively without rushing in a linguistic sense. It would be said, رَتَّلَ فُلَانٌ كَلَامَهُ. So-and-so did tartil. He enunciation of his speech. In religious terms, what's tartil? It is lining up the letters and reciting them with their attributes from their exits, but while slowly dwelling on each letter one by one. And I have an example for you. I play it sometimes before our lessons. But here, Minshawi recites Surat Ghafir with Tartil, Let's take a minute or two just to hear how he recites. Sadaqallahu al-azim. So that's an example of Tartil. This is the most excellent way of recitation. So when you recite the Quran, recite slow, that's good. And if you want, when you talk, you don't have to talk fast also. Enunciate and speak clearly. Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he used to speak clearly and he did not rush his words. Allah commanded that the Quran be recited in this mode when he said, وَرَتِّلِ الْقُرْآنَ تَرْتِيلًا. O Muhammad, recite the Quran with tartil. When reciting in this mode, one must avoid stretching the letters apart to the extent of breaking the words, like pulling the words apart, like in a way that the letters are separated. One must avoid that. One must avoid stretching the letters apart to the extent of breaking the words and causing pauses where they do not belong. So if you want to practice reciting slow, do that and don't break your letters apart like that. The best recitation speed after tartil is tadwir, tadwir. That's just your regular recitation of the Quran, like some recitations we listen to all the time. For example, here's Abdul Basit. This is regular recitation speed.
قل للمؤمنين يغضوا من أبصارهم ويحفظوا فروجهم ذلك أزكى لهم إن الله خبير بما يصنعون.
Sadaqallahu al-azim. When you listen to the Quran, if you want to stop it, don't just stop it anywhere. So if you want, stop it at the end of the ayah, or if not at the end of the ayah, stop it somewhere where if you can understand what you're listening to, where you don't cut the meaning off inappropriately. So the best recitation speed after tartil is called tadwir, which is your normal standard recitation speed. The fastest is called hadr. I had a recitation where someone's reciting pretty fast, but I didn't look for it for this lesson. But not so swift that it breaches the rules. One must avoid, in this hadr speed, one must avoid inserting the letters into each other because now he's reciting faster, so he doesn't want to blend the letters together. Although some reciters prefer one of these three, it is permissible for one to recite at any of the speeds of recitation. Know, however, that some of the reciters in our time have innovated something in the recitation called tatrib, for the reciter to make his voice quiver and shake while he recites. And he extends where there should not be an extension, and in a way that Arabic does not permit. Okay. As for tilawah, it is the continual successive recitation. That means just to keep reciting. So let's say you learned some surahs, let's say you learned Juz' Amma or half of Juz' Amma, and you just want to sit down and recite. It's very nice. You'll put tranquility, inshallah. You'll bring tranquility to your home. If you just sit down, recite a whole Juz', recite for a half hour, 45 minutes, for example, that's tilawah. Taking the recitation from the mouths of the sheikhs is called ada. That's reception. And both of these, the tilawah and the ada, can be called qira'ah, recitation. The judgment of Tajwid is that learning it is a communal obligation on the Muslims. Learning it in general, the rules of Tajwid. There has to be Muslims who know it, who know that science. Except learning to recite the Fatiha, that's not a communal obligation. That is a personal obligation. Its merit, the merit of Tajweed, is that it teaches the recitation according to the way the Quran was revealed. Its reference or source is the recitation that has been tracked and followed by tawatur of the Khalaf from the Salaf. And finally, it is recommended to start the recitation with isti'adha, to say, أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. And this formula that I just recited for you now is better than reciting أعوذ بالله السميع العليم من الشيطان الرجيم. That's what we learned. Some reciters do start that way. However, there is a sunnah that came from the messenger, as you know, before reciting the last three ayahs of Surah Al-Hashr, to say three times, أعوذ بالله السميع العليم من الشيطان الرجيم. أعوذ بالله السميع العليم من الشيطان الرجيم. أعوذ بالله السميع العليم من الشيطان الرجيم. And then you recite those ayahs. But the best, as we have learned, is just simply to say, أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. It is valid to start a recitation from other than the beginning of a surah with the basmalah. Yani, you would hear a lot of reciters when they start not from the beginning of the surah, they don't start with the basmalah, they would start with isti'adha and then just recite. And then one might get the impression that he should not recite with the basmalah if he's not starting at the beginning of the surah. And that is not the case. It is valid to start a recitation that's not at the beginning of the surah with the basmalah, and it is recommended to do so at the beginning of every surah except Bara'ah, for that is forbidden. You can't start Bara'ah with basmalah. It is also recommended for the reciter to beautify his voice. It's another thing that a lot of people who want to teach Islam, they don't do when they recite the Quran in their lessons. Just the Quran is just like everything they say. There's no distinction. The reciter should beautify his voice when he recites the Quran, even inside of his lesson. And it is recommended to ponder on the meanings of the verses if you can understand them. And as we already said, to recite with Tartil. It is also recommended to recite while on a state of purity, meaning having wudu, even if you're not touching the mushaf, and facing the honorable qibla. And if you do memorize the Quran, it's still sunnah for you to look into the mushaf. And it's rewardable to look into the mushaf, just to look at it, open it, and look at it with a good intention. That's rewardable. And it is recommended to use the siwak for the recitation. It is also most essential to have sincere intentions in all of that. And Allah knows best. That's as much as we'll read about Tajweed for today, insha'Allah ta'ala.